Yes.
It will, I hope. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, the second thing we're going to build on is how we proceed to make a building which was formerly functional, not right now, into a monument, but not a dead monument, something that we can have some activity in, and also something that can be related to the development of a rural region. So we're going to be seeing some nice examples of museums in rural regions. Um, And we're going to focus a little bit on a network of museums that a private bank in Greece has created, which I consider at least a very good case study. Now, rural countryside and little towns often host many buildings that in the past used to have a specific function. For example, there were farmhouses, little factories, mills, oil presses, wine presses, etc. But the technological advance and the change of traditional patterns of lifestyle and production often brings these buildings out of use. They make them obsolete. Usually, what follows is a phase of abandonment because the owners cannot support these buildings anymore. And sometimes these buildings attract the interest of investors or NGOs or even private civilians who want to restore them and revive them as part of their history and past. In many cases, these buildings acquire new use as museums, cultural centers, youth centers, and you name it. In the 1990s, the Piraeus Bank undertook the cultural foundation of the National Bank of Industrial Development of Greece. There was a merge, a bank merge there. Initially, they thought of abandoning it, but in the end, the wife of the owner of the bank decided that not only they should maintain this cultural foundation, but actually use it as a means of cultural development throughout Greece. So it became the cultural foundation of Piraeus Bank. And under the inspired leadership of an archaeologist, Dr. Aspasia Louvi, it focused on the rehabilitation of industrial heritage buildings in rural regions and their transformation into thematic museums. Nowadays, this network comprises 8 museums. The Museum of Hydro Movement in Dimitsana, which is a traditional village in central Peloponnese. The Museum of Natural Environment in Stymphalia in the northeastern Peloponnese. The Museum of Marble Working on Tinos Island, famous for its sculptors. The Museum of Industrial Oil Production in Agia Paraskevi on Lesbos Island. The Museum of Traditional Oil Production in Sparta, using only ancient oil producing techniques. The Museum of Industrial Tile Production in Volos in Thessaly. The Museum of Sericulture and Silk in Soufli in Thrace, a region which is famous for its silk production. And the Museum of Mastic Production, Chios Island. I don't know if you've ever tasted the mastic raisin. It's something that can be used as a chewing gum or for scenting food and sweets in particular. And it's unique because it is produced only on Chios Island. I've got a little video, but I'd rather put it at the end so I don't disturb right now the presentation. This network of museums is a best case example for investment on major agents into traditional aspects of local societies in order to create what we call seeds of culture and to enhance aspects of local production and activity that are or tend to be extinct. This is the important thing about these museums. They don't only show things that are dead, but they're also trying to instigate people to follow traditional methods of production or traditional jobs, traditional professions. The first museum was the water-powered Museum of Dimitsana, and it was actually started under the PEOP's predecessor. And this fired a series of developments in the region, which were marked by touristic development in the nearby village, which now counts among the top alternative destinations for mountain holidays and trekking. Here you can see a few pictures of the museum. It was created in an initial complex dated between the 16th and the 18th centuries in different phases, which comprised a water mill, a tannery, a raki making workshop. Raki is a kind of schnapps of pure alcohol, let's say, drunk by people in the countryside, particularly, and a gunpowder factory, because gunpowder is also requires heavy water flow in order to be produced. The restoration work was carried out with particular care so that the necessary interventions to the building shells would not alter its initial form. At the same time, the workshop's permanent equipment was repaired and put back into functioning order. So we're not talking just of a museum where you go there and see, I don't know, digitized material and pictures or exhibits, but you can see it actually functioning the way it was. That's the great philosophy into all the museums in the particular network. In 2003, this museum was accorded a Europa Nostra Prize and was listed among the 27 best projects undertaken in Greece with European funding. Even nowadays, it attracts a lot of schools which go there for a weekend and are guided around. And of course, a lot of freelance, let's say, travelers who combine the visit to the museum with nice trekking activities all around, or even mountaineering on Menalon mountain. Now, what it resulted in, this interest in the village and the area caused an increase of tourism. All houses of the village were transformed into boutique hotels and restaurants. There was a considerable educational contribution because a display of the aspects of pre-industrial economic activity in the 18th and 19th century comes to life in a very interactive way. And of course, the entire younger generation of the region did not abandon it, did not abandon the village of Dimitsana, but they rather stayed there and improved their lifestyle. Now, another example is the of the traditional olive production of olive oil in Sparta. It was again opened in 2002. And it was hosted in a typical industrial building of the interwar period, which formed part of the premises of the electric company at some point. The restoration of the buildings was a difficult and expensive process, but once it was accomplished, it comprised again interactive exhibits showing the history of oil production from prehistoric times until the industrialization phase. The Museum of Olive and Greek Olive Oil aims to become a living organism contributing to the sustainable development of the wider area. Again, it has attracted a lot of touristic movement towards the region of Sparta. And it has become also a member of the network of museums of olive in the Mediterranean. Tomorrow we'll have one of these museums presented in our network, not of the PIOP museums, but of a small entrepreneur who undertook the effort to make a small museum out of his family's oil press. So I believe this network is a very important network to carry on for all Mediterranean countries. So again, the contribution was great, both in terms of tourism and in terms of education. And it also is provided with a very clever and nicely organized museum shop where you can find traditional products based on olive and olive oil, from soap to cosmetics, and of course to extra virgin olive oil sold in this shop. Now, despite the fact that the aforementioned museums are supported by a large bank, which is not so large anymore, I mean, given the crisis, they still face sustainability problems due to their remote location and the limited visitability. In a country with hundreds of museums, which are notable for displaying the ancient past of Greece, which is what most tourists are interested in, these local museums face challenges. So in respect to this problem, what the team in PIOP decided to do was to react by turning the museums into places for continuing education and cultural hubs for all sorts of activities. For example, now they host art workshops, seminars, conferences, even astronomical observation, as you see here. This is the poster for an astronomical observation at the Mastic Museum in Chios. And even now, with the, with the COVID situation, they turn digital very fast, and they hold all kinds of activities that can be held digitally, from folk tale recitation to even handworks workshops for children, where a teacher shows from the screen and the kids do the same thing at home. So they don't abandon the idea, they're just struggling continuously. Another very nice example is the Theodoros Papagiannis Museum in Zoumerka, which is an art museum. When we were in Cáceres, we had the chance to visit the beautiful Vostell Museum. And this inspired us to try and seek out similar projects in Greece, and that's what we came along. It is a museum created by a sculptor, a famous sculptor, Theodoros Papagiannis, who originated from this region, and who wanted to donate part of his collection, part of his artwork, to the community. So they chose this building, which was an old abandoned building of a school, and he basically donated. The municipality undertook the conservation of the building, and Papagiannis undertook the museological study and the donation of his artwork. Now the museum is there in a quite remote area of Greece, but an area which is attracting tourists, again, related to the natural environment and the cultural environment, so alternative type of tourists. And it's not an idle and dead museum, but it also seeks out to hosting exhibitions and works of the sculptor, which are inspired by life. And every year it also hosts conferences and summer schools, as well as some unique educational activities for children. Both the artist himself, but also a series of other artists go there and teach children what they can make with natural material. So this is, again, we come to the idea of building with stone and creating things out of raw natural materials. Another success story, which actually did not rely at all on the financial support of any bank or foundation, was that of the Museum of Natural History of Meteora and Mushrooms Museum. Actually, we would have an exponent of this team. It's a very dynamic team of people who run it, and we invited them to our coaching event, but unfortunately they couldn't attend. Again, we will have them with us, I hope, at the conference or at any other of the coaching events if you want. The museum is not very old. I think it opened about 4 or 5 years ago, but they followed an effective and a targeted branding and marketing policy. So apart from the initial capital offered by the 3 founders, who joined their collections and found this, it is hosted in a modern building, in a kind of industrial building, in the little town of Kalambaka, just underneath Meteora, the big rocky formations of Meteora. Apart from this initial capital, they tried to make it completely self-sustainable, and they created a brand of products related to mushroom. So these products now, within very few months after their launching, they not only became sold in the museum's shop, but they started reaching sophisticated shops, delicatessen shops, and even small supermarkets in Athens and other big cities. And this contributes naturally to the museum's sustainability. So, sorry, something happened with my last screenshot, but doesn't matter. The idea of showing these museums is that we can have we can build on the preservation of our heritage, but having in mind that it has to be self-sustainable. And if we do that, we can definitely come up with a lot of ideas about how to make these monuments, let's say, into hubs of cultural, artistic, and even artisanal activity. I'm sure that all of you can share nice ideas and nice cases from your regions. I have to admit, I was impressed when visiting Cáceres and Spain, but also Portugal and other areas have to share similar cases. Any comments on that? Any remarks, any ideas?
Can I ask your attention, please? Veronique has sent in the chat a link to a Google Doc in order to fulfill your name because we have to have an official how is it, parousia, presentation.
We'll get the presence of everybody, so like a formulary, because this is required by the EU for attendance.